We're back with State Representative Keith Fitzgerald. Keith, I wanted to ask you this question. This is one that I've been dying to ask you all week, because when I was very idealistic. I was a political science major and history major and all that, and then I went to go work in the Florida legislature on the staff.
Okay.
And I was so excited, and when I got there, I was just shocked at all the nonsense that went on. It was just so frustrated me, and it so disillusioned me, and I wondered, when you went there after all your years of teaching, did you have the same effect, or you went there in a
No, not really, and I'll tell you why. Because in political science, people tend to look at state legislators almost like bottom feeders. You know, there's a kind of romantic appreciation of local politics. People look up to members of Congress, senators, presidents. People don't think of state legislators as the best and the brightest, and they don't think of the process as very elevating. And so I understood that I was going into something that's very transactional and pretty disappointing.
Okay.
And again, part of the reason that I was motivated to do it was that if you're going to stand back and complain, you really ought to be willing to try to do something about it. So it helps me not take myself too seriously, because some people get elected to state legislature, they think they're big shots, and they take themselves like they're little kings. I see myself as doing a job and trying to stay maintain my integrity as much as I can in a situation where a lot of people, to be honest, lose it.
What was frustrating to me was the percentage of time that's spent in such a short session on nonsense. And I kept sitting there listening to it going, when are we going to get to the important stuff? I mean, do you have that feeling sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. You're in session for 60 days. Now, of course, there are committee weeks and so forth. You know, the staff has been working on stuff all year long, policies. But when you're on the floor, I would say a good quarter of the time, maybe a half, are ceremonial business. People giving speeches about other people, about how wonderful they are, and recognizing quarterbacks of football teams and so forth, and you certainly have this feeling sometimes that we do have some serious business we could be working on. So yeah, absolutely, it gets a little silly.
I told you before the show I want to ask you some big picture philosophical questions, and I do. What do you think about the structure of the Florida government as far as it being a part-time, temporary, 60-day kind of session with part-time legislators and make a low salary? What do you think about that? Do you think it should be expanded and made into more of a bigger job?
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. If I personally would never make any recommendations that would affect me, because I wouldn't want anybody to think that I was trying to line my own pockets or aggrandize myself. But I think we would have better public policy if we had more professional legislators. I think term limits have had the opposite effect of what they were intended to, because you have people in there for 8 years. They're just really getting up to snuff on policy by the time they have to hit the road or run for another office. The 60-day sessions gives power to lobbyists, staff, and bureaucrats, because honestly the legislators don't have a lot of time to learn their lessons, get into the policies. Remember, a lot of people don't have any background in policy. I'm a little bit unusual, because one of my fields when I did my PhD was public policy. So I came in with an understanding of how legislation works and substantive knowledge of policy and process. Most folks come, as we would like them to, just from ordinary business backgrounds and so forth, and that's a good thing. But they need to learn on the job, and so short terms, short periods of time, all that shifts power to the staff, to the bureaucracy, to the lobbyists, and a lot of the legislators are lost for a while, and so I would like to see that system change.
I just want to briefly talk politics with you. You're in a district that's kind of 50-50 somewhat, registration-wise, Republican, Democrat, and so the state party is always going, the state Republican Party is always going to target your district, and the Democratic Party as well, as a hot district. You've had 2 races now, which were very close, that you won both, where you were subject to some of the most vicious, nastiest commercials and direct mail that I've ever seen. What effect did that have on you? Did that make you, want to get out of this business, or does that make you want to do it even more?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think everybody should think about this. just at a very personal level, when you see this stuff on TV and you realize that your name is being used and they're talking about you, it's sort of surreal. I don't take it personally because it's not about me. It's about some fictional character. So it doesn't make me upset. But it's very tough on the family. It's very tough on your friends. And I think that the negative tone that we have in our politics, and as you put it, the vicious tone that we have, really does discourage citizen legislators. And I think that the kind of people who get into it are very often instead people who are very ambitious. So I think really voters need to start becoming a little more serious about their own citizens' obligation in rejecting that stuff. Because until they start rejecting it, we're going to be keeping good people out of politics.
Real quick, because we got to go to break, but you have a new opponent now, Ray Pilon, who's announced. Do you expect the 2010 election to be just as tough?
I think that the strategy that is open to the other side is pretty much the same strategy that didn't work the first two times. I don't anticipate any change in strategy. A lot of it will come down to how much money is spent. I will be able to raise a lot more money than I have in the past because I'm now an established figure, in a position of leadership in the legislature, both within my party and in broader terms. I'm confident as a candidate that I'm going to do well. But, you know, the way I look at it is you do the best you can, and if people want me in the job, they'll re-elect me. If they want to fire me, they'll fire me, and that's okay with me.
All right, we'll take our last break, and we come back. We'll have our final segment with State Representative Keith Fitzgerald, and of course, our Weasel of the Week.